people who ignored the "don't try this at home" warning. What did you do? Story 1. My brother and I got the bright idea to see what happens if you put one of the CO2 cartridges used for BB guns into a fireplace. Long story short, the resulting explosion filled most of the main floor of the house while flying chunks of burning. Mom was not amused. Story 2. Dry ice and a little bit of water in a plastic bottle. Bad idea. Bottle expanded but did not explode. We basically had an armed bomb laying on a soccer field next to a playground. We had to make it explode somehow, so my dad took a long stick and hit it a couple of times. The bottle finally exploded and my dad heard ringing in his ears for about a year. We did not find any traces of the bottle. Here's the video edit. Wow. This post blew up. Woke up with a full inbox and Reddit gold. Thanks for that. Just so you know, Dad is not actually Donald Duck, he just looks like him. Very interesting to read your stories in the comments. It will keep me occupied for a while. Story 3. Remember lawn darts. My group of friends made our own rules. 2 teams, one in the front yard, one in the back, one member from each team on the side lawn from where you could see both teams at the same time. The goal was to rifle the dart. We only had one, lost the others in a game of woods darts over the house, and make a member of the other team, rightfully afraid for their life, move out of the way of the dart. 1 point if you made them move, -1 point if it landed within arm's reach and they didn't move. This game lasted until someone's parents came home and were horrified when they saw what we were doing. The 80s were a simpler, bloodier time. Story 4. I tried to make a potato launcher out of PVC pipe one summer day. The guy on the YouTube video said not to try it at home without adult supervision. But of course at the ripe age of 15, I wasn't about to let that stop me. So I went to the garage and gathered all of the required materials. My parents probably wouldn't notice a bunch of PVC, and their sack of potatoes was missing anyways, and proceeded to build my masterpiece. I figured that just having it shoot straight would be kinda lame, so I decided to pseudomod it by cutting a slit into the edge of the PVC cap to act as a sort of scope. Thing is, I forgot to shave off the ends that were stuck on the barrel and proceeded to fire off my first round. I ended up getting potato bits everywhere in my garage and almost cut my arm open on a flying piece of PVC. Remember kids, do not try this at home is a valid warning. Story 5. My friends and I recently used our pool skimmer to have a pole vaulting tournament as seen on a nationwide commercial. The fact that the idea came from an insurance commercial should have been enough to deter us. Ended up vaulting all the way to the far end of the pool and smashed my feet into the wall. Besides my 2 sprained ankles, everyone else was fine. Pool skimmer worked really well as a pole. Edit apparently it was actually United Healthcare, which doesn't help our case much. Story 6. When I was like 10 to 11 my friends and I used to imitate, but our show was called, I was the biggest one out of all of us so I took the brunt of the damage. One of the dumbest things we did was have me stand on an office chair and another of my friends drop kicked it. I ended up falling face first onto the floor. I wasn't too injured, but it hurt. Story 7. Decided to make my own fireworks. Apparently potassium nitrate or stump remover and sugar mixed together makes for a pretty good smoke bomb. The way you make it is you mix the 2 ingredients together and put it in a pan over a small flame. The heat melts the 2 together into a chocolatey brown goo. If you put that goo into a cardboard toilet paper roll and stick a wick in there you have a pretty big smoke bomb. The first time I did it we had a lot of fun smoking out an entire park. Then I decided we needed to go bigger. This is America after all. So I doubled the ingredients and started cooking it on my stove. Stupid me forgot that the video said medium to low heat and I had the burner on high. Halfway through cooking it the heat caught the mixture on fire and started going crazy. I got my brother out of the house and dumped water on the mixture. For the next 2 hours you couldn't go in my house because the smoke was so thick you couldn't see more than 2 feet in front of you. My parents were crazy mad at first because the ceiling was burned, the countertops charred, and the floor was even melted a bit. Then once they got the insurance money their attitude changed completely. We now have a brand new kitchen that was way nicer than our last one. TLDR made bootleg fireworks, destroyed my kitchen, now we eat off of marble and granite. Edit to everyone talking about the insurance part of the post. The insurance covered the ceiling being burned. All of our cabinets were burned and a couple countertops. The stove was melted and even the dishwasher caught some damage. We're very thrifty and the do-it-yourself kind of people. We bought all our appliances secondhand, even the cabinets. With the money we saved we bought the raw material for the marble countertops and put it in ourselves. We also tiled the floor ourselves. We still had some money left over so we bought a nice granite table at a flea market. People don't realize what you can accomplish by learning to do things on your own and going to flea market Craigslist. Story 8. Me and my friend decided to golf off each other when we were around 14. The initial idea was to drive off the tea that was in our mouth, but common sense kicked in and we decided against it, but still wanting to go through with it, we decided to do it, with our butt cheeks cringe. I went first as the hitter, and it went way better than I expected. I lined that up and drove it as far as I could, while still caring for my friend's buttock safety. Not a scratch on him so I was ready to be hit off. I laid down on my stomach and put the tee in place, and my friend lined his shot up once and goes all in for his swing. He follows through and puts the driver right into my cheeks, and at that moment it felt like everything I once knew was wrong, and I was hurting like, but that's besides the point. Listen to the advisory kids. Edit thank you for the guild you beautiful soul, that should replace my pain with something nice. Story 9. I was staying at my friend Ben's house, who was a bit of a latchkey kid. The movie Daredevil had just come out, and I was maybe 12, it was 2 in the morning and we were busy skating around the front of his house. annoying the out of his neighbors. I got the awesome idea that we should light the skate rail we had on fire, just like in Daredevil, so I grabbed a can of gasoline that was sitting in his garage, and proceeded to coat the rail with it. After coating the rail with the gasoline, I lit the gas and it was a little lackluster. I figured, let's just throw some more gas on this tang, so I did. The gas trickling out of the can caught fire and the can exploded in my hand. Luckily, my reflexes saved and I let go of the can just as the flame hit it. Ben's lawn was completely aflame. I just walked inside and didn't do anything about it because I didn't want to get in trouble. TLDR, tried to be Ben Affleck, lit my friend's lawn on fire. Story 10. Ugh, I cringe whenever I remember this. When I was 12-13, the movie was really popular and my friends and I would watch it almost daily. We thought they were all so cool and funny for doing stupid for the sake of a laugh. Well, we would try to recreate some of the stupid gigs they performed. One day while my mom took my friends and me to the grocery store, my friends convinced me to pull a prank on some dude shopping. I grabbed a huge pack of toilet paper, walked right up behind this dude, and threw the TP at this guy's back. He turned around and screamed at me, a little nerdy 12-year-old girl in glasses, and walked away. I have never been more mortified since then, and from that day on I decided that was actually really stupid and immature. Probably every wrestling move on my brothers in 2000-2001 sometimes went wrong and hurting them. Powerbomb on wooden edge of the bed. Story 11. When I was about 10, I folded myself into a sleeper sofa with the help of my cousin. Hey race, why this is an incredible bad idea. You cannot breathe, you cannot move, you can shout for help, but your cries for help will travel at best 5 feet because your mouth is smothered by a mattress. The spring mechanism in combination with your weight will make it nearly impossible for someone to pull the mattress back out. Unless they are very strong or you are very light. My cousin had to run upstairs to get a grown-up to flip the sofa on its side so I could roll out. If I did this stunt while I was by myself, I probably would have suffocated very quickly. Story 12. You know those parkour videos? I tried doing some of that when I was 12. I jumped from a bench onto a small wall and I landed on my belly. Ugh, that was painful. I couldn't breathe and my thighs hit the edge, so I couldn't walk either, but I looked cool, right? Story 13. Launched bottle rockets out my buddy's ear gauges. Edit. Good news, guys. Found the video. The guy in the red shirt, Kyle. Yes, I know, everyone has hate for Kyle. Story 14. My brother and I made thermite in high school and melted a GameCube, among other things. With it, I feel like Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman told us not to try that at home at least once. Story 15. My brother and I would play WWE with some of our friends as kids, and would never let anyone win, so one day he came after me when I had one of the championships. I forgot to say that he had the other 2 belts. So he and I had a match, and at one point I decided to go for a powerbomb. I couldn't lift him up all the way and dropped him on the air conditioner. Accidentally, he was on the ground, lying in a fetal position in a puddle of water, so I went for the pin, and the puts his arm up. I remember the kids that were doing commentary screaming out of shock. I waited for him to get up and went for a super kick. I missed and he pushed me into the bottom left corner of the window, and that piece broke and I got a cut on my forehead. I wanted to cry so bad, but he tackled me into the wall, put me on the bed and did a rock bottom from the bed onto the floor. He pushed me off the bed. He pinned me, and won my cardboard belt. He held all the titles in our little wrestling group at the time, and I still hate him for it. Story 16. So, I wore a baseball hat a little too much, and had this huge clogged pore skin type thing on my forehead. It looked like a pencil eraser smack dab in the middle of my forehead. Had it for 2 months with no change. I researched online and found that with a bottle of Jack Daniels and a few friends, that I could use wart freeze-off and might have some luck with getting it off. I told my doctor and she laughed in my face. She said, good luck with that. Let me know how it works out. I took that as a challenge and just to make sure, verified there was no major facial nerves that I might accidentally freeze. In the end, it worked better than I thought. I essentially killed all the cell tissue, and it fell off, and healed up fine. 1010 would do again. Story 17. I drank antifreeze on purpose. It's both spicy and sweet at the same time. Not in a Chinese food kind of way, in a chemical reaction on your tongue kind of way. It's delicious, and if you taste it you'll understand why animals and children will drink it. Not recommended. Story 18. I was around 34 and my sister was 18 mths too, and after watching Barbie Swan Lake before bed we decide to imitate the scene where Odette jumps the waterfall in the bedroom we shared. Me being the eldest, naturally went first, jumping from our windowsill onto our bedroom floor. I landed it and felt like a boss. Then came baby sister's turn. She broke her leg trying to copy me. Needless to say she can't remember much. All taught myself, and my parents have fond memories of her running round the garden with a neon pink cast. She now claims she got her revenge by pushing me off my scooter when I was 8 and she was 6, so I broke both bones in my arm. Unfortunately I can remember that a lot more and spent a holiday abroad in a bright orange cast. Story 19. I arrived at a party maybe 15 minutes after they put on Beerfest in the background. This was right after it came up on DVD. I said I'll try to drink with them. People told me don't do that. They literally had a warning saying not to do exactly that. Punched a hole in the wall. Woke up my mother from vomiting so loud in my pants. Story 20. Royal Rumble in the back garden 4-on-4. Fly kick my cousin into the wall. Crack his head open. Goes to the hospital and gets stitches. Few years later he tried pushing me into the pool. Pulled him in with me and his chin caught the edge. More stitches. We don't talk much these days. Story 21. I'm from India, and when we were kids like in late 90s there was a TV show called Shaktiman who was like Captain America for India. he used to fly, and there was a scene where he saved dozens of people who were thrown down from the building by a villain, and he used his super-fast speed to save them all. My younger brother jumped from a building, and his last words were Shaktiman Bacheo, save me Shaktiman, thinking he will save him and he would get to meet his fave superhero. There have been more than 20 cases like these. I don't feel bad talking about it as it's been far too long, yeah. Story 22. Not sure there's ever been a don't try this at home warning for this particular thing, but it certainly qualifies as something stupid. Now to set the scene. A bunch of mates and I go camping every year. It's a pretty awesome weekend and we get up to all sorts of stuff. Well, this year, in our drunken wisdom, we decided to shake the out of a can of beer, bury it, and then build the fire pit on top. Don't ask me why, we're idiots or something. So cut to a few hours later, we've all completely forgotten about our little time bomb ticking away, all sat around having a good time when the mother of all explosions takes place. Wed had the campfire down to a bed of coals for cooking, thankfully, so that when the can went off, it only launched dirt, ash and coal around, as opposed to what would have happened had we built it up roaring like usual. For about 10 seconds afterwards felt like a lot longer. I'm sitting on my dazed and confused, looking around, ears ringing as ash and dust gently tumbles down into the campsite. Felt like a scene out of a war movie. No one was injured and we all have a pretty awesome story to tell now. Still would not recommend anyone tries it at home, though someone most likely will. Story 23. My friend had access to dry ice our sophomore year of college from his research gig. We filled water bottles with dry ice and some water, and capped them, throwing them and watching them blow up in mounds of Buffalo, New York snow. One didn't detonate, so I decided to defuse it, instead of it detonating as some stranger walks by, and it went off in my hand, miraculously nothing more than a few scrapes on my hand, and 30 minutes of being deaf in my right ear. Story 24. Put orange juice in a soda stream and tried to carbonate it. It had a warning saying not to do it. I read said warning. I'm usually not the type of person who ignores warnings, but this didn't seem like it would be an issue. I thought it was because the carbonator tube would get sticky and clog, but I thought that I could clean it. Nope, that's not why. It explodes. I was finding sticky spots for months. Story 25. When I was around 11, I started asking my parents and all the other adults I knew if I could have their old electronics to disassemble for fun. All of them thought this was the typical kid disassembles and then reassembles a printer thing that my dad had already done with me several times. Nope. I had blueprints very poorly drawn, because I was 11 for a number of devices I wanted to build. I'd read up on Wikipedia and my dad's old EE textbooks to figure out what materials I needed to build a cutting laser, a microwave flamethrower, an arc welder, and a few other things I've forgotten over the years. As the broken electronics filtered in computers from the early 90s, defunct DVD players, etc., I slowly acquired the parts one needed. My mother figured out what I was up to and stopped me shortly before I was about to extract the capacitor from a broken microwave. She was afraid of how much charge the capacitor could store, and it turned out that given my poor grounding safety practice, I likely would have fried myself. Turns out, my dad's old textbooks hadn't explained the potential health ramifications of electricity, and for all the math I could do I was still A. The other, less dangerous stuff still would have been awesome, but I was banned from messing with electronics until I left for college a couple years later. Story 26. I have a ton of stories. I wanted to be a stuntman growing up and my all-time idol was Evel Knievel. Before I knew Parlor existed I was into jumping from roof to roof at my grandma's house. The houses weren't too far apart. One day I was climbing up to my training area. I used to have to climb the gate and up the side of the wall. I slipped and fell and fractured my tailbone. I also received one of those rockets that you launch and it comes down on its little parachute. A friend's, and I wondered what would happen if one of us got shot by it. So we took turns shooting it at each other using a pipe to aim it in our general direction. We were wearing our four-wheeling helmets and swimming goggles for safety, and he got hit square on the head and survived our amazing stunt. We also tried building an underground base using an old camper shell as a roof and charged kids money to jump their bikes and whatever over our area of operations if we were in it. That I think was the stupidest thing we really did. Some kid took his dad's four-wheeler and tried to jump over us while we were laying down in it and almost crushed us. We were about 9 to 12 years old, and the neighborhood kids would make us feel like rock stars when we rolled on by in our Huffies. Story 27. Back in 2007 me and my friends were really into WWE and we would do matches on his trampoline. Suddenly an argument got heated and my friend's brother backbreaker him on the patio floor. Another time, he had a plastic WWE microphone and I took it with me when I went to pee. Now I was a very scared kid. But really scared kid, and I was deathly afraid of this jigsaw mask from the movie Saw that he had. So I go out of the bathroom to find him at the end of the hallway with the mask on running at me. Now in the WWE, for those who don't know, when two guys are talking on the microphone and an argument heats up, a lot of the times they take a microphone to the face. So there I am, holding the microphone as he comes at me with the microphone and me remembering the microphone to the face segments. I smack him dead in the face with the heavy plastic microphone. He plopped to the floor and when he takes the mask off he's bleeding all over the place. I was just distraught. Worst of all was hearing him scream and yell at the clinic as they were sticking his head. I was traumatized by that for the following months, but he was really cool about it and he didn't hold anything against me except for our other friends that hated me thinking I did it for the lols. I lost contact with him years ago, but he was a really cool and genuine dude. Moral of the story is, whenever Chris Jericho or John Cena tell you not to try any of that at home, you listen to him chopped up a Christmas tree and stuffed it in the fireplace, then lit it, Sounded like a space shuttle launch. Don't do it. Story 28. 8th grade metal shop teacher told us scary stories about safety so we wouldn't chop our fingers off in any of the dangerous metalworking equipment. One day he told us about putting match heads in spent 22 shells and hitting that with a hammer. The climax of the story was when he dramatically showed his thumb, which was missing the end joint, presumably the punishing result of the aforementioned crafting activity. The instant we got out of school, a group of us went looking for spent 22 shells which were curiously easy to find, now that I think of it. We got a box of barn burner matches and set to detonating. Those things are loud, and they shred the brass in interesting ways. This went on until one of the spectators got a hunk of sharp hot brass in his cheek and ran howling down the street. We scattered, and nothing was ever said about the whole incident, until now. Story 29. Use a ton of tannerite on a giant propane tank that apparently had some propane left in it. I have roughly 40 hearing in my left ear and 60 in my right and degrading because of it. My idiot cousin shot it before I was in the trench and had my hearing protection on. I got thrown into the hole and couldn't hear for days because of the shockwave. His brother got thrown into the hole and was in a medically induced coma for a few days to try to stop brain damage. He's okay, but not 100 anymore. My cousin lost several teeth when I knocked him out a week later in retaliation. He then lost some more when his brother beat the out of him. Story 30. I used to jump out of second-story windows and trees for the of it. Bend your knees and roll when your feet hit and you'll be fine well most of the time. This is the proper way to land if you're falling a decent distance. I've also made thermite, jellied gasoline ghetto napalm, you get the point. Shot a propane tank with various caliber guns until it blew up. Shot a snake with 12-gauge shotgun loaded with birdshot little pellets and got hit by ricochet from some metal that was on the ground by the snake, 3 or 4 pellets. All they did was break the skin and hurt pretty bad. One did hit my face a few inches below my eye. Riding a wagon as in a red generic wagon down a steep pond levee repeatedly until the wagon broke. Hooked a wakeboard I think, the big heavy ones to a four-wheeler and rode on it and ramped stuff. Jumped off multiple bridges. Climbing up buildings, the list could go on. The irony is I have a bad back. But it's naturally bad and the only time I ever really injured it was falling downstairs. Story 31. I actually have an interesting story. When I was young less than 7, I watched an episode of Zoom where they made mold. Being the curious little scientist I was, I reproduced their experiment to ensure the science was sound. I filled an egg carton with milk, cereal, and cheese. I did this all in secret of course. I actually hid the carton in a dresser, perfect hiding place. It was dark and warm, so the mold grew like mad. Sadly this genius experiment was cut short by my mother. She went to open the dresser, only to find it jammed a little tight. It eventually gave way, spilling the contents all over my clothes. Coincidentally, I'm allergic to mold. Story 32. Jumped from the turnbuckle my bunk bed through a table. Still have the scar on my forehead where I had to get like 10 stitches almost 15 years later. Story 33. In middle school my friends and I built a ballista. That went swimmingly as one can imagine. Holes in all the neighbors' siding. Flaming arrows accidentally soaring into yards hundreds of meters away. We were on top of a hill in a neighborhood. And other things that I can't or won't remember. Quite impressive actually for being 12 to 13 years old. Story 34. Did WWE and UCF stuff with my friends. We would grapple about and do submission moves on each other. Didn't know how effective the sleeper hold was till I almost choked my friend out. Also triangle chokes, arm bars and leg bars hurt like the Boston Crab, not so much. Story 35. I was 16. It was the end of my junior year in high school, back in the late 90s. I had grown up with computers and was super interested in them. And at my school that summer they were offering a build-your-own PC class. I told my dad I wanted to take it. He looked at the price $400 to just take the class, $1,600 to keep the computer you built, and told me I could take the $400 one. I pouted and asked what good was it to build a computer if I couldn't keep it. He said fine, don't take the class. A week later he picked me up at school and drove to Fry's and bought Fixing and Upgrading Your PC for Dummies by Andy Rathbone. In his mind, this 20 book was going to take the place of the 1600 class. It actually did. As he upgraded his computer, he gave me the parts of his to put into a cheap case with a cheap motherboard we got from Fry's. I learned an awful lot about hardware, and to this day am still more comfortable with the internal guts of a computer than I am with the software, despite the fact that I've taken programming courses much more recently than I've done any work on a computer's innards. I had started with a cheap power supply, but the one in his computer was a much better one. He was getting rid of it because he found out that it was causing brownouts on his motherboard. Well, that wasn't going to be much good if it did the same on mine, so we cleaned it out. After making sure my computer worked with a power supply, we turned off the machine and unplugged it. The computer was 3 feet away from its cord on our dining room table. We both grounded ourselves occasionally by touching the metal inside the case, despite the fact that we weren't on carpet so not really building up any static electricity. This was before canned air was much of a thing. I was using a paintbrush to clean the vents, but it really wasn't doing much good. My dad is like, oh well just open it up. I pointed out all the warning stickers all over the thing. It can still hold a charge for weeks after it's unplugged. ITLL void all these warranties, all that other stuff. My dad, who is very comfortable with electricity, says well it's not like you're going to be touching exposed circuitry or metal with your hands. You're just cleaning off the fan. So I trusted him. We opened it up. This meant an impromptu lesson on what the guts in there were. He showed me the capacitors and other stuff. At one point, my finger went between two things that were sticking up about an inch or so, and at least 2 inches apart, with nothing whatsoever in between them, because he asked me to point something out to him. That was the point at which I electrocuted myself. It really was, as far as I can figure, a mild electric shock. It was extremely unsettling to feel. I can still recall the almost jiggly feeling it left me with. 20-ish years later, I had never known before that electricity could just sit around in the air, much less how strong of a sensation you could get by touching charged air. 6 months or so later, my dad gave me a ceiling lamp for Christmas. He tells me, but you need to install it. You're skittish around electricity. He'll help and tell you what to do, but you're going to be the one on the ladder doing it. I can't think of anything I'd done in the 6 months from letting him talk me into electrocuting myself to the point at which I got the ceiling lamp that would make him think I was skittish around electricity. It's not like I frequently dealt with exposed wires, and I was still pulling off the case to upgrade that computer every time I got a few bucks or a new toy. I really wanted to tell him, well, if I'm skittish around electricity, it's your fault. Instead, I installed the lamp, feeling more skittish on the ladder than I was with the exposed wires. TLDR, Dad convinced me to ignore warning labels on a desktop computer PSU, and we opened it up. He asked me to point something out to him on the inside, and despite not touching anything but air, I mildly electrocuted myself. Story 36 built a railgun at a friend's dad's machine shop out on his farm back in 10th grade. We cut a small tree in half with a single bolt I made. Our capacitor array wasn't set up the best, and the transference rails had some intense arcing powerful enough that the affected parts of the rails were completely vaporized. Took about a week and a half to build everything out of scrap his dad had around the shop. That was incredibly amazing but scared the out of us. His dad was on board with it until we actually fired it. He was expecting something along the lines of an oversized BB gun in power, not a cannon equivalent to a high-powered rifle. Fucking, can't you kids just make a potato gun? In hindsight, I'm glad I had the thought to block the thing from view because the arcing probably could have had permanent effects on our site. Story 37 took a dump in a Lowe's model toilet that was on the floor. As seen on, young me was pretty stupid. Mixed ammonia and bleach to pour down the drain during a fruit fly infestation. Everyone lived. The fruit flies were no more. Success. Story 38 lit a smoke bomb indoors. Hilarious until Mom got home and found the scorch marks. Used a dry chemical fire extinguisher inside with no fire to extinguish. Hilarious but tastes horrible. Shorted the tracks of a vintage model train to make sparks. I have a scar from where the piece of metal landed. 32 Benadryl is way more than you should take for allergies. Just enough to have a conversation with a stranger in the bathroom mirror. Story 39 putting gas on a fire from a gas can. It worked great up until it didn't. I had done it dozens of times with no problems. Then one day, it followed the vapors back into the can and ignited it. The can exploded and near took my hand off. Thankfully the handle had been reinforced, so I got off with bruising and swelling in my hand and on my side. So, don't try this at home. You might not think it will happen to you, but it can, and given enough time, probably will. Story 40 melted polystyrene with petrol to make a gooey mess. I tied a cardboard tube to a tree, lathered the inside, introduced flame, and used compressor form. Front looked and sounded like a jet engine neighbor, though I was building a WMD. Story 41 I read on the interwebs as a youngling of 14 that if you heat up a deodorant can then you'll get a cool little fire. So my adventurous self goes and gets a large, almost empty Sure deodorant can. It's key that it's almost empty, that is almost purely compressed oxygen, or so I heard. I make a little bonfire and throw my mistake to be in the middle. It's taking a while to do anything, so I get close to my fire and take a look. Boom. The deodorant can explodes with full force like some sort of grenade right next to me. My ears are ringing like the opening to Saving Private Ryan, and my mother came outside saying the house shook. I'm so lucky the metal shrapnel from the can didn't hit me, or I could have been hospitalized sooner than I'd like. Sweet explosion though. Story 42 I rafted a Class 6 Rapid unrunnable. You'll never see that river again. There was a lot of focus, screaming, laughing and whiskey. Don't ever try that at home, nope. Story 43 I've got two had a Roman candle fight on motor scooters. My friend's GF got hit in the and it burned through her shirt and scorched her. Filled a plastic bottle with gas and kerosene and added a wick. Lit it in a park and was sorely disappointed when it just slowly burned, melted over itself, burned some more, melted and repeated. Disappointment turned to fear when the grass caught fire and we were 2 blocks from any water. Had to stomp it out while picking up the burning gas bottle with sticks and throw it in a trash can. No joke, we get back to my friend's house and his mom is watching a news story about 2 boys seen fleeing a burning park. Turns out it was a park on the other side of town. We were morons that day. Story 44 I was a rebel kid at turn of the century. Without real internet access to watch videos, we learned to make stuff from books and text files we shared on floppy disk. We made napalm once, which was pretty bad. It stuck to the ground and I think the mark is still there to this day. We made thermite too, but there was nothing to burn through and grass wasn't that impressive. Tennis ball hand grenades were always a fun one. They never looked like they would hurt. If there was tennis courts nearby, we'd always sneak one onto the court. I think the worst was probably fireworks fights. You know how it says not to point them at people? We did. Bangers being thrown at you was normal. Someone using a Roman candle as an RPG. Story 45 My little brother and I were jumping off a 6 or 7 foot wall into a bush because we watched and thought it looked fun. Half an hour later I'm going to the hospital with a 1.5 inch diameter stick lodged 4 inches into my left hamstring. not fun. Story 46. I'm Indian, and I lived in Dubai around the age of 15. It was Diwali, the Hindi festival of lights, and we had a bunch of fireworks. Now technically, the public celebration of Diwali and other Hindu festivals is discouraged in Dubai, especially with the unauthorized use of fireworks, but the majority of the city were South Asian, and nobody cared, so I visited a friend's house that evening. She lived on the 12th floor of an apartment building in a densely populated part of the city, lots of other buildings close by. She said that she had some sparklers, so we went out onto the balcony to light them. Things were going well, until I picked up a really heavy-duty looking thing that I thought was a large sparkler, which was in very similar packaging. The warning on the side said do not hold during operation or something along those lines, but I was really sure for some reason that it was a normal sparkler, and so I ignored the warning. I lit the thing, pointing one end away from me. Suddenly, massive fireballs started shooting out across the road. The force was great enough that I felt like I was holding a hand cannon. It was really lucky that I got the ends correct, or the first fireball would have hit me square in the stomach. There was nowhere to point the thing, because the entire view was blocked by another apartment block close by, so I was basically shooting fireballs at the next building, and people were screaming at me to stop from their balconies. I tried aiming down at the road, but people down there were shouting and waving at me to stop, probably because there were lots of cars, and the stupid thing wouldn't stop for ages. I panicked, and turned it around and started firing into a bucket of water that my friend had brought out. The force was great enough that the water looked like it was exploding out. In the process of turning it though, a stray ball must have grazed her. As she threw her dupatta shawl in the bucket too, it had caught fire. Finally, the thing stopped. Her parents were pretty angry, as they thought I had done it on purpose. They had previously thought that I was a smart, responsible kid, but I think that ended that day. We were all scared that the police would pay us a visit, but luckily nobody came. Read warning labels on fireworks and make sure you know what they are before you use them.